Please welcome to the stage, Seattle Police Chief Adrian Diaz, Snohomish County Councilmember Jared Mead, Pierce County Sheriff Ed Troyer, and your moderator and afternoon host, Jason Rantz.
Hello. We have a little bit of a policing problem, don't we?
Well, keep your elected sheriff and it'll go away a lot quicker.
Let's dive right in. So I'll start with Sheriff Troyer. How much of the crime crisis that we're currently experiencing is directly related to policy?
Most of it, all of it, absolutely. All the reform, all the no chasing cars, let all the kids go. If you've read down in Pierce County last week, we've had 3 sets of shootings and robberies, all juvenile kids and stolen cars. Every one of them, I'll bet you when we catch them, have been in jail multiple times in the last year. It's kind of a catch and release thing, especially with juveniles. You can't, they say, well, kids 17 and under can't make the decision whether to commit crimes or not, right? Yeah, so that's really our problem right now is the lack of enforcement. I mean, I believe in rehab and counseling and everything else you can do. That's why we have a bunch of mental health counselors that ride with my deputies. But you got to have something on the back end for the really bad.
Chief Diaz, do we go too easy on juvenile criminals or juvenile suspects?
I think if there's a way that if you have a first offense or first couple offenses, you've got to be able to figure out how do you restore somebody back into the community, because you don't want to use it to be always a punishable system. However, you do have to have accountability. So whatever process is, sometimes that is jail. Sometimes, honestly, taking somebody to jail is going to save their life because they've been involved at a shooting scene multiple times, and they are going to be the next victim. So actually putting them and incarcerating them actually could potentially save their lives. And I think even some of the outreach workers actually understand that piece as well. So,
Councilmember, there seems to be a move to keep as many people out of jail, regardless of how often they are accused of committing a crime. You're a Democrat. We don't hold that against you. But it does seem like, are we putting too much politics into policing?
I think politics has absolutely negatively impacted policing. As soon as politics gets involved in most things, it tends to negatively impact that thing. But specifically with community safety and policing, you see policies that tie some of our officers' hands behind their backs when they're trying to go out in the community and keep people safe. The original question was about keeping people out of jail, and I think it is a good policy to start trying to work towards finding ways to divert people so we're not filling up cells expensively to the community for people who maybe could use other resources to get off the street, get out of the cycle of recidivism. But at the same time, accountability has to come. It can't just be compassion. And I may vary a little to the right in my own party when I say stuff like that, but it shows in the data that you can't just go one way with it. And
we won't tell them that you said that.
Thank you.
Well, one of the
This
things
is live,
is
right?
being the sheriff is I get to run Pierce County Jail. And our jails are no longer jails. They're mini prisons. 85% of the people in our jails have mental health and drug or alcohol convictions, and 93% are felons. We have 26 people awaiting murder trials. We have 15 juveniles that have been reprimanded to adult status waiting murder trials. And then we also have about 70 people that the courts have ordered for their mental health restoration rights to be done, and they're not getting done because Western State doesn't have the room, the state's not taking care of it, and the judges have recently started fining the state to pay these people that are in jail. We have a couple inmates that have been in jail for a year and haven't had their mental health hearings yet. And they're getting $200 a day by sitting in jail paid by the state because the state can't get it done. So jails, like you said, we don't want people in jail that don't need to be there, absolutely, or kids. But we have hardcore felons in our jails. They're like mini prisons.
So Chief Diaz, I think everyone here agrees that politics getting involved in policing is not the best move. You're in a really difficult position, right? Unlike the sheriff, you're not elected. You report to the mayor. In a lot of ways, you report also directly to the council. So how do you balance, and how should we balance policing when it comes to oversight at that local level?
Well, we have a lot of oversight. We've been under consent decree, so we've had an inspector general and community police commission and OPA, and you've got all these layers of accountability in our system. So you're trying to make sure you're working in those environments. You also have policies that are also, looking at best practices and trying to figure out how do you police better in the community. And these are all challenges, and then that doesn't include the elected component of it. These are just stuff that you're actually just trying to structurally do. But at the end of the day, it's trying to make sure that the officers have the equipment and tools, the ability to do what is needed for them to actually make the city as safe as it can be. And, I know our officers they become resilient. They become very, very agile to be able to try and make sure that they're working within policy, they're working within the law, and that they're actually making really good arrests. Like this last year, we actually recovered the second most amount of guns than we've ever recovered. And so, that's really what you're trying to make sure that you get to is good policing, and that they're actually making the city as safe as possible.
Who did you recover the guns from?
Most of our guns are coming from a variety of different ways. So sometimes it can be for domestic violence cases. It can be for extreme risk protection orders. But a lot of the cases are where people are shooting. We have about 40% of our guns are used in 2 cases or more, and so that we recover. And so guns that are coming out on the street, it's not just once. It's not just once and then it's done. It's actually being used multiple times, and that's where when it gets passed along, that's where you're trying to figure out who's preying on the community, and we've got to put those people in bars.
Councilmember, the state legislature decided this year and previous sessions to limit our constitutional right to bear arms. And certainly there are a lot of conservatives in this audience who certainly believe that our rights are being violated. Why should I not be able to have my Glock have a magazine that carries 15 rounds in the context of the crime crisis? I'm not the one committing crimes.
Well, so I wasn't in the legislature when they voted on that. We haven't considered that on the county council level. But if you're asking for my personal perspective on it, I also stray a little bit off from my party, center right, when it comes to protection of the Second Amendment. So I don't know the specifics of the legislation you're referring to as far as ammo rounds in the clip, but I do think that in Washington State we've gone a little bit too far, and I think in future years risk going a little further if we don't make this clear that there's a priority in protection of the Second Amendment in Washington State.
Sheriff, what are your general views on these restrictions on guns? That's called a softball.
Well, first of all, being elected sheriff, if anybody tells me to come for your guns or magazines or extended magazines, it's not going to happen. They can send the state troopers to do that, but we're not going to do that. It's already kind of crazy because I'm not a big gun person, but I have 4 or 5 of my own personal guns.
On you right now.
Well, no. No. But when I walk into a gun store right now, obviously armed, and they know I'm the sheriff, and I still buy a gun, I still have to wait 10 days as I walk out of the store armed. Mm-hmm. So there's some things that need to kind of be reeled back a little bit because of the war on law enforcement. And what's happening is we're losing officers to other states because I hire 1/3 of my department's military. And as most people know, Inslee and Ferguson aren't my fans, mainly because started when we didn't do the mandate vaccination. So I've got 20 officers, yeah. And I'm sorry, Chief, I've got 4 or 5 of your people. And they're great people. We've got 4 or 5 Seattle people and others that were gonna get fired, and I hired them through Fish and Wildlife, State Patrol, and everything. Great people, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but I'm a freedom of choice. And so we hired them.
Well, let's talk about staffing, Chief. I mean, SPD is not doing well when it comes to staffing. You're not bringing in nearly enough. I think what the estimate or the projection at the end of the year is that maybe you'll bring in 5 more than you lose, something around there. I'm told you guys need 500. Yeah. So, number one, what do you view as the actual problem and what's being done about it?
It's really trying to figure out, like, what could we actually draw people into this work? And I've talked to chiefs across the country. Everybody's experiencing some level of staffing issue. I'm trying to make sure that we actually put good incentives on the table, things that are long-term, that keeps people in the profession. I want to see stuff like medical retirement. I want to see stuff that actually gets people to say, like, this is a profession rather than a job that I can only be in there for 7 years and I'm gonna leave it. And so you really are just, that's a struggle. Right now, it's a very difficult job. There's a lot of accountability in the officer. The officers are scrutinized for every aspect of what they do. So it's difficult to really do that recruiting. But actually, while our recruiting challenges are huge, last year, we lost probably like 80 officers more than we had. So to get to 5 officers over, it's a better transition, but we still have a long way to go.
Would you want to work, if you were not an officer and you were thinking about getting into law enforcement, would you want to work for the Seattle City Council?
That's actually interesting because when I came on the job, I didn't know any members of the Seattle City Council. I didn't come into the job because of City Council. I came in because I actually want to serve. I want to actually go out and do work. And it's Seattle. We have a lot of shootings. We have a lot of crime. And if I want to actually go out and do that level of service, like, I need to be in a big city to be able to do that. And it's not anything against small cities. I just like to be more active. I like to be proactive. And so it does draw people to it. It should draw people to it. I know there's a lot of restrictions on policies and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, like, officers are doing really, really good work. And I'm trying to highlight all the work that they do every single day. They put their life on the line, and they're recovering guns and making good arrests and solving crimes, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, and in Snohomish County, I mean, there have been some staffing issues. I know I talked with Mill Creek PD about some of those issues, but for the most part, you've been able to avoid the overly left-wing defund groups. How does that happen?
Well, I joined county council in 2020. I was in the legislature before that, and I joined in April of 2020. George Floyd was killed in May of 2020. That's when the defund the police and all of that craziness started. I was appointed chair of the Law and Justice Human Services Committee my first month there. So all of those policies kind of came right through my committee. And the way that we were able to hold that back was we did joint proclamations, resolutions between myself, a Democrat, and another Republican on council, thanking our officers for the work that they're doing, recognizing that. And this was in the heat. This was in July of 2020 when all the riots were happening and Molotov cocktails were getting thrown in Seattle at precincts. And we did a resolution that said, hey, we love what you're doing in our communities. We know that it's hard right now to be a police officer. Stay in Snohomish County. We've increased benefits to our officers. We've increased wellness, health benefits to our officers. So I think some of it is policy, but I think a lot of it is also the culture and what we're putting out to the communities and how our officers feel they're respected or seen by community members.
And that last point, it's the community, right? I mean, I understand why officers in Seattle are frustrated. I hear from them. I don't hear that from King County deputies as much. I don't hear them at all from Pierce County or Snohomish County or Thurston County for that matter. How should they deal with in Seattle a community that is actively fighting against cops?
That's the question for me. As elected officials, we have a responsibility to set the tone in our communities. And in Seattle, unfortunately, they have elected officials who are setting a negative tone when it comes to policing. And so, of course, you're going to have community members echoing what certain Seattle City Council members will be screaming. And we have a system right now that's set up to incentivize really dumb people to say really dumb things really loudly.
I think you were right the first time.
I didn't say dumb people, you said dumb people. But we have a system that incentivizes that incentivizes dumb things to get said loudly and oversimplification of issues like policing, like law enforcement. And so, of course, if you have elected leaders, like in Seattle City Council, saying overly simplified messages that are really extreme, and then they dig in rigidly on their ideologies, of course, that's going to trickle down to the community members who are saying, well, the person I elected and that I respect, that's leading me is saying this, I'm going to parrot that, and that's how that toxic environment spreads throughout a community, and then you get officers that feel disrespected.
Well, let's talk about one of those, to quote you, dumb policies. Vehicular pursuit bill, a ban, a little bit different policy on this stage, regardless of that bill. But there was, I guess they're calling it a compromise that really didn't address the issue there. How much of the crime do you think is directly related to the fact that you can't chase? That's for the sheriff.
Well, it's not a matter of can't chase, because we don't chase people around in circles for a long time like they make it sound like. Once we know they're going to run, we have very good tools to take them out really quick. So we can't do that, and they know that. One Saturday night, we had one of our sergeants count how many people ran from us on regular traffic stops. We had 38 people that didn't stop. And I was talking to my people, and they're like, yeah, sometimes they actually stick their middle finger at us, and we kind of appreciate that, because then we know they're not going to stop. We don't even have to start. I'm like, who the heck would ever thought we would have gotten there, you know? But we have some really cool new tools coming. I'm sending a team to Phoenix to train on some things, and I wish I could tell you about some of the things we're going to be doing, but by the end of the summer you'll follow them, and I'll get with you. But we don't want to give away our secrets, because we really believe that, you know, the majority of the problem is being created by a small percentage on these car thief people. It is, and if we can take those small percentage out, and the top 100 criminals out, you'll see a stop in crime.
Yeah, and that's the same
Right.
in pretty much every city
And,
that's
and
dealing
you know,
with
and
this.
you know where in Pierce County, you know where the most cars are stolen from? Within 6 blocks of the jail, because they need a ride home. True. The circle's really dark.
It's time management. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
I mean
efficiency.
that's what got them there, and that's what got them home. You know?
So Chief, SPD before the law had a policy that basically outlawed, or not outlawed, but the policy was against chases. And I understand why you might not want to get in a chase in downtown Seattle at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday. What's the problem with any kind of pursuit based upon the officer's judgment at 11 p.m. on that Tuesday?
So our focus actually is we have the probable cause standard for violent crimes, and we focus on violent crimes when it comes to the pursuits. The reason why is typically our biggest payouts of car accidents that we actually that end up ending in death. It's a massive amount. It's a massive amount when it comes to pursuits, and so like when you have to go to a family and say like you lost your loved one because we were in a pursuit for a small level of crime, that's a huge issue for us, and we still are pursuing. I can tell you that I regularly, especially in the summer of last year, I felt like there was a pursuit every single day, because there's crime every single day. There's violent crime every single day, and so officers are doing everything they can to help solve stop some of the pursuits. We're taking some of the other tools that Sheriff Troyer probably is also trying to implement as well, because we also want to figure out how do we stop these situations so it doesn't escalate into a potential death. And so I think everything in policing is like, how do we create it so we're not in this long pursuit at high speeds that literally could have jeopardize the community. And so that's that balance.
But how much do you think the general culture of lawlessness that has very clearly surged over the last several years impacted that? Because you've got folks who are saying, yeah, I don't have to stop.
Well, I think it comes down exactly to what we've also been talking about. You have sometimes the same utilizers that literally are stealing multiple cars over and over and over again. Not just like 8 times, 15 times, 20 times. And that's where you got to figure out, how do we do really good police work, getting good cases in there, and making sure our prosecutors are doing their work and making sure that they're charged and people are being held. Because at the end of the day, it's accountability. You got to have it. I've got to be able to have people to be able to prosecute. I've got to make sure that the jails are going to hold people, because all it is going to do is I'm going to have high levels of auto theft. And then anything when it comes to other crimes, violent crimes, like, you've got to be able to make sure that people do not allow it to understand that all they're going to do is just run. You've got to have that. Like, people have to know that we can pursue. And right now, like during the state law, we had to have certifications, and in some sort of police intervention. So I had to write. It was like one of the hardest things you do, but I had to write a directive basically saying, for right now we cannot pursue.
I posted that memo on Twitter 10 minutes after you sent it.
Yeah. and that's not, let me tell you, it wasn't the easiest thing. I had to get my team. I said, I need this done in a week and a half. Like, we need to be able to get back up into pursuits. And so we had literally just tried to rush to make sure that we put all the things in place, because I can't have a homicide suspect, but I got to make sure that I protect the officers, but I can't have a homicide suspect go out, commit a crime, and then we're not going to pursue them. It just can't happen that way. And so that's the reason why it's like, no, team, let's get to the table, let's get this done, and we did it.
So we have 1 minute left. Same question for all of you, about 15 seconds each. What if you can make one change to a policy, whether it's a law or just a policy on the books, that would make policing safer for your officers, but result in a safer community? What would you do? We'll start with the sheriff.
Well, just last 2 weeks ago, I was in D.C. and put 2 of my guys on the wall that were killed in the line of duty. Last year, I did 1. I've had 6 since I've been around of our 10. And a lot of it comes down to when we look at the people that shot and killed our people, they've all were 3 strikes candidates. They've all been in prison multiple times. They've been through the rotating door, and they knew they were going to go away again and wanted to fight it out. We should not have to be put in that position. But we got to make sure that those people are held accountable so they don't hurt other people. So right now, the state has 3,500 empty prison beds. In Western states, I mean, very minimum, and McNeil Island's empty. There are room to put these people that need to be there. So if people that need to be locked up get locked up, 90% of our problems go away. For you and for my people to keep them safe.
Councilmember?
So instead of taking that answer, this is a great answer, I'll also say our officers, we're asking a lot of our officers right now, we're asking them to do a lot of things that they don't want to do, frankly, and that we shouldn't, as a society, expect police officers, commissioned officers with guns to waste their time doing. Dealing with mental health crises, for instance, is an example. So getting our officers, first of all, investing the dollars. When we talk about defunding the police, if we want to talk about actually making policing better and safer and our community safer, you need to put more money into law enforcement so that they have access to resources like mental health professionals, so that they can get the trainings that they need, so that when they enter scenarios like that, they aren't risking themselves because they're maybe not as qualified or trained to do a certain thing. I've been advocating for getting more physical training and health, jiu-jitsu type of hand-to-hand combat training for officers so that they feel more comfortable implementing some of these holds that they need to restrain certain people that maybe they don't need to use a weapon or a taser or whatever, but they don't have the resources available now. So we need to make sure.
For so many years, they said, drugs, alcohol, mental health, let the cops handle it, let the cops handle it, let the cops handle it. Now, the cops shouldn't be handling this stuff. His people, my people need to do police work. So I have 9 mental health workers that we call co-responders embedded with our deputies. And when there's a mental health call, they're there on scene. And it makes a huge difference. Then I have 8 mental health workers in our jail, which makes us the biggest mental health facility in Pierce County, second in the state.
Such a bragger.
Western states.
Just bragging.
Western states, right? Worthless.
Chief, Jiu-Jitsu, Krav Maga coming to SVD?
Well, shoot. I'm thinking 3 things. I have not been able to stop staring at your socks here.
It's my daughter, my middle child.
I think every one of our officers are going to get these fancy socks. The second thing is really investment in officer wellness. I got to make sure that our officers are healthy from day one to the end of their career. I mean, you see trauma over and over and over again, and I want to make sure that our officers are healthy in mind. And I know that if I have a healthy officer, you're going to be able to do good work, good police work out there. And number 3, and this is not a policy, it's really just community saying thank you to the officers. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah.
100%. We have on this stage folks who have completely different ideological positions, and yet we've been able to see that they agree on a whole lot of stuff. I think that's worth pointing out. Round of applause for the Chief of Police Seattle, Adrian Diaz. Snohomish County Councilmember Jared Mead. Sheriff Ed Troyer. Thanks.